Welcome to TLSTalks Radio, where your host, Dr. Terrell Strayhorn, also known as the People's Professor, curates courageous conversations and promotes positive points of view each episode. Just as he does each week for TLS Talks podcast, airing every Saturday at 12 noon Eastern on YouTube, Spotify, and internet radio. This ain't just a radio show. It's real talk for real life radio style. Woo! TLS Talks Radio. Turn it up and let it flow. Purpose, wellness, love, and life. Words that heal and light the night. Real conversations, voice strong. A place where everybody belongs. Hope and wisdom, heart and soul. Helping people live more whole. TLS Talks Radio. Real talk everywhere you go. Life, love, purpose, let it show. With the People's Professor on the radio. TLS Talks Radio. Come be inspired, learn and grow. Courageous voices, positive light. Real talk, real life, radio style. TLS Talks Radio. Powered by Mixler.
Awesome. Well, hello, friends. And welcome to another episode of TLS Talks Radio, where we curate courageous conversations, promote positive points of view, and bring science to society. I'm your host, Dr. Terrell Strayhorn, also known as the People's Professor, and this is Real Talk for Real Life radio style. Whether you're listening from your audience, or rather from your office, riding in a car, walking through the airport, or preparing dinner, working out in the gym, or simply sitting still for a few minutes trying to catch your breath, I'm glad you're here. And I mean that. I really appreciate you for tuning in and sharing across all the platforms. Do me a favor, if you're tuning in from Facebook or from Mixler or any of the others, if you'll share, drop this link into some of your networks, tag someone who needs to listen. I'm glad that you're here. Today I want to talk about something that sounds academic at first, but it's actually deeply personal. I want to talk about fairness. Not just whether a rule sounds fair, not merely whether the person who created the rule meant to harm anybody. I want to talk about what happens when a policy appears neutral on paper, but creates unequal consequences in people's lives. And here's today's question. Can something be unfair even when nobody admits that unfairness was the intention? Let me say that again. Can something be unfair in impact, even harmful, when it wasn't the intention, when nobody says, I intended to discriminate, I intended to exclude you, I intended to hurt your feelings, or I intended to leave you behind? That's our conversation. Before this episode is over, I want to give you a simple framework for examining fairness in your workplace, your school, your organization, your church, and perhaps even your community, your family, or your relationships. Because sometimes the intention may be innocent, but the impact is still injurious. And mature people must learn how to look at both. I want to tell you a little story. So imagine a building. It's a beautiful building, newly constructed, bright lights, modern furniture, glass doors, shiny floors. The person who designed the building proudly announces, this building is open to everybody. And technically, that statement is true. There's no sign on the door saying that certain people cannot enter. There's no security guard standing outside turning people away because of their race, their gender, their age, their height, income, disability, or background. The building is, according to its owners, open to everyone. But there's a problem. The only entrance is at the top of a long flight of stairs. There's no ramp, there's no elevator, no accessible alternative. Now somebody who uses a wheelchair arrives and the owner says, "We didn't build those stairs to discriminate against you. We didn't intend to discriminate against you." And maybe they did not. The architect may not have awakened one morning and said, "Let me design a building that excludes people who live with wheelchairs or people with disabilities." And here is the uncomfortable truth. The absence of bad intent does not magically create equal access. The building may be open in theory, but closed in practice. And I think that distinction really matters. It matters a lot because we have become so good at defending ourselves by explaining what we didn't mean, by what we didn't intend, by what we weren't trying to do. I didn't mean it that way. I wasn't trying to offend you. That policy applies to everyone. I treat everyone that way. I don't pick up the phone for anyone. We treat everyone exactly the same. But fairness is not measured only by what the rule says, the intent. Fairness is also measured by what the rule does, impact. Who can enter? Who can participate? Who succeeds? Who's punished? Who receives another chance? Who gets trained and educated? Who's believed and who's not believed? Who's constantly asked to overcome barriers that other people never have to face? Sometimes a staircase is just a staircase, but sometimes a staircase reveals who the builders imagined would enter the building. And that brings us to today's edition of Trending Now. This is Trending Now, where we move beyond the headline and ask what the news means for real people. A significant education and civil rights story emerged this week, if you haven't seen it already in the news. And this is where the U.S. Department of Education announced that it would stop enforcing federal regulations based on what is called the disparate impact under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Disparate impact. So let me translate that into English, plain English. For years, civil rights enforcement did not only look for a smoking gun. Investigators didn't always have to find an email that says, "Hey, let's discriminate against black students," or "Let's create a policy or scholarship that would discriminate against Latinx or those who are LGBTQIA2S+, or "Let's design this policy to disadvantage Latino families," or "Let's be harder on this particular group of people to succeed," or "Let's treat black faculty differently. Let white faculty earn money from outside compensation while limiting or restricting that which black faculty can generate." Instead, regulators could examine the results of a policy. For example, does a supposedly neutral discipline policy repeatedly produce significantly harsher outcomes for one group over another? Or does a school closing strategy consistently remove educational resources from the same kinds of communities? In college admissions, it's something like, does an admissions or placement or testing practice create a predictable barrier for certain students with disabilities or low income, no income students or first generation, even though the policy does not name those students directly? The Department of Education and federal agencies could look at the impact of policies. Regulators could examine the results of a policy, not just sort of blatant intent. The department now argues that disparate impact enforcement encouraged racial balancing and subjected schools to federal overreach. Civil rights advocates argue that the change removes an important tool for detecting systemic discrimination, especially when modern discrimination is rarely announced openly. The Chronicle of Higher Education described this as the elimination of a tool used to address unintentional discrimination. So the intent was not to discriminate, but the results, the impact, is patterned forms of inequity or injustice that characterize what we would call discrimination And therefore, that disparate impact rule or disparate impact policy within Title VI was used to then advocate and address those kinds of issues. Well, the Chronicle describes this as elimination of that tool used to address unintentional discrimination, even as higher education continues to navigate a broader and often confusing retreat from formerly DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And the Chronicle reports that DEI-related changes have affected hundreds of campuses across nearly every state, and you can access that report in that dashboard on the Chronicle's website. Now, I want to be precise. People can reasonably debate the scope of government regulation, obviously. People can debate how statistics should be interpreted. As a statistician, as a quantitative researcher, I want to preserve the right for people to debate how these stats can be interpreted. But people can certainly debate when unequal results prove discrimination and when those results have another explanation. Those are legitimate policy discussions that happen in the White House, in the Capitol, and every state capitol, and policy boardrooms all across this country and across the globe, quite frankly. But we must not confuse debate with denial. We can debate it, but we ought not deny it. Unequal impact is not automatic proof of malicious intent. But neither should unequal impact be treated as irrelevant. And that's where my concern lies, because when the law says that intent is the only story worth hearing, people harmed by systems may be placed in the impossible position of proving what was inside someone else's mind. That when the law says intent is the only story worth hearing, then you look at the building that's supposedly open or, allegedly open for all, and because the builder did not intend to discriminate against those who need assistance to get up the steps, then justice is served. Discrimination is not possible. And the onus, or the burden of proof, is placed on the person living with the disability, the person living with the wheelchair, to then prove that inside the builder's mind, he, she, or they intended to harm them. Let's be honest. Very few people write down their biases. Very few institutions put discrimination in their strategic plan. And almost nobody begins a meeting by saying, "Good morning, team. Our objective today is to create an unfair policy. Our objective today is to be unjust and inequitable toward our fellow brother, sister, and teammate." No. The policy usually arrives dressed in neutral language. Terms like efficiency, standards, fit, tradition, professionalism, merit, budget necessity, campus safety, and organizational restructuring. And obviously, sometimes those are legitimate goals, but our responsibility is still to ask, what happened after the policy was implemented? After the standards were adopted? After we infused technology and created efficiencies? After we set rules and expectations around professionalism? After we established merit criteria? After the budget was allocated? Who was helped? Who was hurt? Who disappeared from the room, and who stopped applying or was disciplined or left the organization and never returned? That is not political correctness. That's responsible leadership. That's the work toward belonging. So now it's time for the professor's podium, and class is already in session. So today's lesson, I want to talk about intent and impact. Intent explains behavior, while impact reveals consequences. Accountability requires us to examine both. Let me say that again. Intent explains behavior. That usually before an individual has to act or carry out a behavior, they intended to do so. You intend to get good grades before you get good grades. You intend to apply for that job before you apply for the job. You intend to go to bed before you go to bed. Listen, you intend to break your diet before you eat the cookies and the cake. Impact reveals the consequences. Because you intended to break your diet and you engaged in that riotous eating, the impact reveals the consequences. Now you are feeling stuffed. Now you are gaining weight. Now you are breaking your pattern. Impact reveals consequences. And accountability, that is to hold someone accountable, say in the case of the metaphor of this diet, to hold someone accountable to the diet, we must examine both the intent, what they intended to do, as well as deal with the impact of their behaviors. There's a dangerous habit in modern life, and that is the moment someone tells us that our words or choices or our policies caused harm, we rush to defend our character. But I'm a good person. But I care about everybody. That wasn't my intent. I didn't mean it. I didn't intend to. That's not what I had hoped. But I have friends who are. But the question is not always whether you are a good person. The question may be whether the outcome, the impact was good. A surgeon can have good intentions, still make a medical error. A teacher can love students and still practice pedagogy that disadvantages some learners. A supervisor can believe in fairness and be award-winning and still repeatedly promote people who remind them of themselves while denying people who are different from them the very opportunity for promotion. A parent can want the best for a child and still say words that injure the child's self-esteem and sense of confidence. A university can celebrate belonging in its mission statement and in spoken word and even pep rallies, while maintaining policies that tell certain students, you're welcome here. As long as you navigate barriers we refuse to acknowledge. Not yours or mine, but a university can celebrate belonging in its mission statement and have big pep rallies and even make belonging a core value while maintaining policies and practices that promote and celebrate the skills and the cultural mindsets of some while diminishing the cultural wealth of others. That will honor the history, the contributions of some, while denying the contributions and the assets of others. That will elevate one group while subjugating another. Good intentions matter, but they can't be the final measure. And here's what I want you to carry with you. When someone tells you about the impact, do not respond only by explaining your intention. You hurt my feelings. Well, that's not what I intended to do. You broke my heart. Well, I wasn't trying to break your heart. You didn't make me feel seen. Well, I was trying to. No, when someone tells you the impact, don't respond first, explaining your intention. Listen first. Ask questions. Examine the pattern. Repair what can be repaired. Change what needs to be changed, because an apology, as I've said on social media just recently, that only explains intention is often not an apology at all. An apology that honors the impact, while certainly admitting the intent, can be a doorway to forgiveness, to grace, and belonging. Sometimes it is simply a defense that we use when we state our intent. So we want to listen first, ask questions, examine the patterns. Ask questions like, I wonder what made you feel that way. What specific behavior of mine, not in a defensive posture, but help me help myself. Help me understand what I did wrong so I can never do it again that way. And then repair what needs to be repaired and change what needs to be changed. If your words or your tone, I was listening to someone speak the other day who was talking about raising their voice at someone, and the person said, "Are you raising your voice at me?" And they said, "No, I'm just talking loudly." And I apologize if I came off as if I'm yelling. But while apologizing and listening, they are also altering the volume of their voice to bring it back to a talking level. Remember that sometimes offering your intent is simply a defense, and what we need is not defense. We need to honor the impact, admit the intent, apologize, so that we can be on our way to a better situation and hope. Class dismissed. All right, we're going to take a quick musical pause. As you listen, I want you to think about one question. Where in my life have I been defending my intention instead of examining my impact? Maybe it's at work, maybe it's in your family, maybe it's in your leadership or a friendship that has gone distant or become distant. Don't judge yourself, just notice it, and we will be right with you right back. Hold on, I've got this little issue here. And we'll be right back after this.
Good energy attracts good things. I shine my joy, I spread my light, and everything around feels right. The good I give is what I bring. Good energy attracts good things. I walk into the room, they know who it is, but I ain't worried about a thing. They know who it is when I got my day ones. I don't need no friends. Give me the bass, turn up the BPM. There goes my phone, and I don't pick up unless I know it's someone calling with good news. Cause I've been told, good energy attracts good things. I shine my joy, I spread my light, and everything around feels right. The good I give is what I bring. Good energy attracts good things. The ones who said that I was a wannabe, now they wanna be like me. Cause the second you start being your own team, then you see what I mean, you'll see what I mean. What you give is what you get, just like I said. Good energy attracts good things. Good energy attracts good things. Good things. Good energy attracts good things.
Alrighty, welcome back to TLSTalks Radio. I'm your host, Terrell Strayhorn, People's Professor, and today we're talking about what happens when rules look fair, but the results are not. So let's bring this home with some practical strategies for you who have to live with, like me, these unfair, unjust kinds of policies and practices. So what can we do? I want to give you a simple tool that you can remember. I call it the 3 I's fairness test: intention, impact, and improvement. Intention, impact, improvement. 3 I's. Number 1, intention. Ask, what was this policy statement or decision designed to accomplish? And be honest. Name the legitimate goal. Perhaps the goal was safety or efficiency, consistency, quality, academic quality, financial responsibility, accountability. Don't assume that every unequal outcome came from hatred. That closes conversation rather than opening it. 1, what's the intent? What was it designed to accomplish? 2, impact. Ask what actually happened, not what we hoped would happen, not what the committee predicted or what the policy says on paper, or even what the research predicts according to theoretical models. What happened in people's lives? Look at the numbers, but also listen to the stories. Data can show you the pattern. Stories can help you understand the pain. Data can show you the pattern. Stories can help you understand the pain inside the pattern. Who experienced the policy differently? Were the outcomes predictable? Did leaders receive warnings? Did the same group bear the burden repeatedly? And please remember, a small number of people can still experience significant harm. So a problem is not insignificant merely because it did not happen to the majority. 3, improvement. For 1, intention. 2, impact. 3, improvement. Ask, knowing what we know now, what should change? This is where mature organizations distinguish themselves. Immature organizations use all their energy proving that they were not wrong. But mature organizations, healthy organizations, agile organizations use their energy making the outcome better. Maybe the policy needs revision. Maybe staff members need training, or maybe exceptions need clearer guidelines, and maybe affected people need to be included in the redesign and the reformulation. Maybe leadership needs to apologize, or maybe followers need forgiveness. Maybe the organization needs to track results rather than assuming the problem disappeared. Intention, impact, improvement. The 3 I's. That framework works in public policy, both and in personal policy. Works in the classroom, it works in the workplace, and yes, it works in relationships. Your friend says, "When you stopped calling, I felt abandoned." And you reply, "I didn't intend to abandon you. I didn't intend to kill the relationship." That explains your intention, but it does not address the impact. A fuller response might be, "I did not intend to make you feel abandoned, but I hear that my absence affected you that way. Help me understand what that season was like for you. Then let's talk about what rebuilding trust would look like and require." That response does not surrender your side of the story. It simply makes room for theirs. And making room for another person's experience is one of the most powerful ways we communicate belonging. Belonging is not just having a seat at the table. It's also making seat and space for others and their stories as well. Well, I'm excited about that because I do think that that's what belonging is. So, friends, we're living in a time when words like diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and belonging are being debated, restricted, renamed, and sometimes removed from institutions altogether. But you cannot eliminate a human need by eliminating a word. You can remove belonging from the department title, but people still need to know that they matter. Sure, you can remove equity from the strategic plan, but unequal barriers will not disappear because the vocabulary changed. You can weaken the mechanism used to detect disparate outcomes, but the people experiencing those outcomes will still carry the consequences. And this is bigger than party. It's bigger than political affiliation. It's bigger than a single administration. This is a question of leadership. Do we have the courage to examine results that disturb the stories we tell ourselves? Can a school that considers itself welcoming, listen when students say they feel unseen, unheard, unsafe? Can an employer that describes itself as fair study why the same people keep advancing while others remain stalled? Here's a hard one. Can a nation that declares liberty and justice for all examine whether liberty and justice are reaching all? Because fairness must have eyes. Fairness must look. Fairness must examine. Fairness must be willing to count. And it must be willing to listen. Fairness cannot close its eyes to the outcome and then congratulate itself for having good intention when the impact is bad. You see, the opposite of discrimination is not merely neutrality. Sometimes neutrality preserves the very conditions that created the problem. The opposite of exclusion is not merely an unlocked door. It's an accessible door, an accessible entrance. The opposite of silence is not noise, it's voice. The opposite of isolation is not proximity. You can stand in a crowded room and still feel alone. The opposite of isolation is connection. And the opposite of indifference is not a statement, it's action. So this week, examine one rule, one tradition, one decision, one relationship, and ask yourself, what was the intention? 2, what has been the impact? 3, and what improvement is now required? Don't be ashamed to discover that something needs to change. Change is always good, and it's not always evidence that you were a terrible person or that it was a terrible policy. Sometimes change is evidence that it was teachable, it's correctable, it's improvable, that it's a living, growing organization and community, a growing person, a responsible person, a leader who loves people enough to see what you could not see before. And somebody listening to me today needs to hear this. Your experience does not become imaginary simply because another person says they did not intend to hurt you. Your pain is real. It deserves examination. Your voice deserves room. Your story deserves to be heard. But as you advocate for yourself, make room for truth, evidence, growth, and restoration. And we do not have to choose between accountability and humanity. We can tell the truth about harm and still believe that people and institutions can change. These both can be true at once. We can demand fairness without surrendering hope, and we can build systems in which more people can enter, participate, thrive, and belong. That, my friends, is the work. That is the calling. And friends, that is how we do good work. Thank you for spending time with me on this episode of TLS Talks Radio. I would love to hear your thoughts. Where have you seen a rule that looked fair on paper but worked differently in practice? Put a comment in the chat on any of those platforms, and during the breaks or throughout the week, I'll go and I'll comment on them. If you haven't already, please go to our YouTube channel. It is at the @ Terrell Strayhorn on YouTube. Or if you go to YouTube, type in Terrell Strayhorn, hit the button to subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you'll know when we go live. And do connect with us on social media at TL Strayhorn and share this broadcast with someone who believes that fairness requires more than good intentions. Remember, you can always join me every Saturday at 12 noon Eastern. That's 11 Central for TLS Talks podcast on YouTube. This Saturday, my guest will be Sam Leeson. You don't want to miss it, where we will continue these courageous conversations through real talk for real life. Until next time, take care of yourself, take care of somebody else, and wherever you have influence, use it to build a world in which more people know they matter. Peace.
Thank you for tuning in to TLS Talks Radio with your host, Dr. Terrell Strayhorn, known as the People's Professor, specializing in bringing science to society. That's real talk for real life. If you found this episode informative, please like and subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Hit the notification bell so you're informed each time we go live or drop new content. We invite you to tune into TLS Talks Radio throughout the week on Mixler at TLSTalksMixler.com. So until next time, friends, don't be afraid to talk real talk, and don't be afraid to live real life. This is TLS Talks Radio. Real talk for real life. Radio style. Peace. TLS Talk. What TLS walks. Real talk. Real life. New hope. New life. With the People's Professor. We're gonna be alright. TLS Talks Radio. Where courageous conversations come to life. TLS Talks Radio. Powered by Mixler. Streaming live on platforms everywhere. Welcome to TLS Talks.